And we are back, y'all. Thank you for watching today. Go ahead and hit that like button, people. You know, it helps us out a ton. And of course, it helps you because it helps us. Now, y'all, do you remember a week or two ago when Donald Trump's administration announced that they had sent 200 and some people from the United States to El Salvador to some kind of like maximum security prison in El Salvador? Well, that was challenged. That was challenged in the courts, okay? Remember, they had already sent them, and that Judge Boasberg was like, hey, turn the plane around. Well, that was challenged in the courts, and today, the Supreme Court has issued a ruling. Now, this is called Trump versus J.G.G., and it was a high-stakes immigration and national security case, and it's sending shockwaves through the legal field, as you can imagine, because this is kind of for all the marbles. I mean, you have the plane, it was already in the air. You had it carrying people. You had Judge Boasberg like, turn the plane around. And of course, Trump is using this kind of many centuries old Alien Enemies Act to send these people to El Salvador. So let's take a look at what happened.
Federal judge is ordering the Trump administration to disclose the details of this weekend's deportation efforts by noon tomorrow.
Sherelle Hubbard has more on whether officials violated judge's orders by going through with those deportations.
Hands off our doctors now!
Protesters showed up to express their discontent over the deportation of Rasha Alawi, a Brown University assistant professor and doctor who was deported from Boston to Lebanon over the weekend.
She is far from the only person facing unfair and unjust deportation.
Also deported over the weekend in spite of a restraining order, hundreds of Venezuelan migrants, many of whom the Trump administration accused of being gang members.
That was a bad group of, as I say, hombres.
On Saturday, the administration invoked the Alien Enemies Act, a rarely used 18th century wartime power to begin those deportations to an El Salvador prison. Despite that fact, the migrants were expelled. The administration is strongly defending its actions.
The judge's order was patently unlawful, beyond unlawful.
We removed terrorists. That should be a celebration.
The administration is challenging a potential legal loophole.
Well, there's actually questions about whether a verbal order carries the same weight as a legal order as a written order.
The White House press secretary says the detainees were outside U.S. territory by the time the judge's written order was filed, though he'd issued a verbal order earlier. Monday evening, in a hearing, a judge scolded the Department of Justice for defying his order.
This is ultimately then a fundamental question of separation of powers. The president is simply thumbing his nose at Congress.
I'm Sherelle Hubbard reporting.
To give you some history, in March 2025, Trump issued Proclamation 10903. This was invoking this Alien Enemies Act, okay, which is centuries old at this point. So he's detaining and deporting Venezuelan nationals affiliated with Tren de Aragua. That's this gang from Venezuela, supposed to be one of the worst gangs in the world. And so he designated them a foreign terrorist organization, said that they are invading the United States, rounded a bunch of them up, put them on a plane, and sent them to El Salvador. So, of course, lawyers got involved. They appealed this all the way to the Supreme Court. And today, in a brief unsigned decision, the court vacated restraining orders. It did not weigh in on whether or not the deportations are legal or not. Instead, it ruled that the proper way to challenge deportation under the Alien Enemies Act is through habeas corpus filed in district of confinement. So Judge Kavanaugh, he concurred, adding that historically habeas corpus is the correct route for detainees challenging transfers or removals, including in war and terrorism cases. Now, of course, you have some of the justices who, you know, they're going to dissent, right? Including Justice Sotomayor. She issued what we might call a fiery dissent. She accused the government of acting unlawfully, secretly moving people, denying them basic rights, and rushing deportations before the courts could act. She warned that even U.S. citizens could be wrongly caught up in these policies. Okay, now Justice Jackson added her own separate dissent, calling the Supreme Court's decision hasty, you know, paraphrasing, and saying that the Supreme Court is making this decision without full arguments, and that on the Supreme Court's part is dangerous and could actually be a failure on the part of her own colleagues in the Supreme Court. Now, this is by no means the end. The Supreme Court didn't say, okay, y'all can deport people, okay? So it wasn't like green lighting these deportations, but it did shift how the detainees can challenge them. So now those who are held must individually file habeas corpus petitions in their local district courts. All right, so that's going to make it more difficult for them. And remember, you have also this situation where the Maryland man was deported to El Salvador as well. And then the Justice Department said that that was a mistake, right? So today, of course, the Supreme Court said that the Justice Department didn't have until today to get him back, but has more time.
All right, breaking news. Chief Justice John Roberts is temporarily blocking a district court order requiring that a Maryland man mistakenly deported to El Salvador be returned to the U.S. by midnight. So this gives the court more time to consider the issue after the Trump administration requested they intervene. So the legal team for Kilmar Obrego Garcia now has until tomorrow night at 5 to respond. CBS News Department of Justice correspondent Scott McFarland has been following this case closely. Scott, thanks for joining us. What can we expect in this case?
Well, the Supreme Court's going to hit the snooze button proverbially on this case. Doesn't really change the fundamental dynamics here. They now have until 5 p.m. tomorrow to make their arguments over the matter, but the matter stays the same. A court in Maryland, a federal judge, has ordered the return of Mr. Obrego Garcia by the end of the night tonight. Well, that's now pushed at least through 5 p.m. tomorrow. The Department of Justice has acknowledged it was a mistaken deportation that shouldn't have taken place, but they've made the argument they can't get him from El Salvador because it's now in El Salvador's jurisdiction. The U.S. Supreme Court may hash out some of what comes to them in this. They may kick this back to the federal judge in Greenbelt, Maryland, but for now, the deadlines have been delayed. They have not been canceled.
Yeah, and so many layers to this because now we've learned the Department of Justice lawyer who unsuccessfully argued in defense of Obrego Garcia's deportation was actually placed on leave, administrative leave. So what does that mean? What are those details?
There's already some casualties to these arguments themselves. The person who was in court Friday in Maryland making the argument for the Department of Justice was put on administrative leave, we learned on Saturday. Indefinitely. This is the same attorney who was in court acknowledging that a mistake was made, and the Department of Justice, the Attorney General, didn't think there was a zealous enough argument from the attorney, so he's been benched. There'll likely be a new name on the next set of filings if they come from the U.S. Justice Department, but you can see the stakes in this case, that there's somebody put on leave after a high-profile hearing, that they have let this and challenged this all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court. This is now a high-profile legal argument, and to a degree, Jules, it's a game of chicken between the executive branch and the courts. There's a court order there, and the executive branch, the administration, does not seem inclined to want to follow it. What happens next is important not just for Mr. Obrego Garcia, but for cases in which the courts challenge the administration nationwide.
All right, Scott McFarland. Scott, thank you so much.
So, y'all, what I want to know, what do y'all think about all this? I mean, the Supreme Court is going to have its hands full with the Trump administration's challenges. Oh my gosh, imagine being Supreme Court. You normally have a few challenges involving the Department of Justice, and now their whole docket's going to be filled with Trump stuff. What do y'all think about this? I'd like to know. What do you think about the fact that somebody can be picked up, just sent off to El Salvador, and then the government says, oh, we can't get them back? You know what I mean? Let me know in the comments, y'all. But before you do, please stop, hit the share button. Y'all know it helps the channel out so much when you share this. So hit the share, put in somebody's email or text message or WhatsApp, Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, put them all in and share this video out. Of course, if you're not a subscriber, please do subscribe. Want to thank y'all for watching. Love y'all, and we'll see you back in the next one.